Kia ora koutou, ko Claire Lanyon Tongarewa. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Tara Fagan and Mel Thompson to share Expanding Horizons, Unleashing the Power of Online Courses. I always sound drunk when I'm tired, I'm sorry. Okay.
Kia ora tātou, ko Tara Fagan Takuangoa. I'm Principal Advisor Learning here at Te Papa Tongarewa.
Kia ora, ko Mel Thompson toko ingoa, ko Kaihanga Akoranga Ipurangi I Te Papa. Aho, I am the online course creator at Te Papa.
So today we're talking about online courses and Te Papa's experiment in piloting these courses. As part of the Te Tiaki Tonga Association of Educators Beyond the Classroom project, which was funded by Manatū Tonga and supported by Te Papa as part of the COVID-19 Response Fund, we developed a suite of professional learning and development for educators working in the cultural and heritage sector. Part of the suite of professional learning programs included online courses. During this presentation, we will talk about some of our online courses and their progression, but first we'll look at online learning and what it is. There are a range of platforms and opportunities to engage with content. So MOOCs have been around since 2007. They're known as MOOCs, or Massive Open Online Courses. And I accessed my first one in about 2009. I did the Justice course by Michael Sandel through Harvard University. And for me, I've always wanted to go to Harvard. So the opportunity to transport myself virtually to go there and learn by somebody of his calibre was hugely amazing. And it got me hooked on what MOOCs and online learning can offer. So MOOCs are globally accessible. You can learn from experts around the world. They're equitable regardless of gender, finance, location or qualification, and some of the early research into MOOCs showed the ability of these courses to give access to people who weren't able to attend courses because they were restricted because of gender or because of finance in their own countries. So it opens up learning opportunities to those who might want to access them. And they're flexible, offering ubiquitous learning opportunities so you can learn anytime, anywhere. Online learning has become more prominent in recent years with required shifts to remote learning during our most recent pandemic being an accelerator for one reason. This chart from Statista shows the number of users engaging in online platforms. The blue line represents online learning platforms as a whole, so any type, whether it's FutureLearn, Coursera or a range of others. The black is online university courses and the grey is online professional learning certificates. So you can see that online learning platforms are taking off at a higher degree. Regionally, Asia Pacific saw the largest student presence on the learning platform Coursera, with 28 million new online learners registering for over 68 million courses. Traditionally, MOOC completion rate can be lower amongst users, with many reasons cited for this. Some people just want to dive into the content and leave the rest of the course alone, and I have to put my hand up for that. I sign up for lots and lots of courses, go and access the content I want, and then withdraw from the course. So forensic psychology, for example, I wanted to go in and learn a piece of information. I did that part and then withdrew from the course. So that's one of the reasons. For some learners, they miss the social engagement, and for some, it's about the motivation and accountability of having a cohort of peers moving through courses with you. However, since the pandemic, many formal learning courses are fully online or now offered as a hybrid model, as we all know. So why museums? Our experience with the learning programs for our cultural and heritage sector educators through the Te Tiaki Tonga project got us to wonder what learning opportunities museums could offer online. Museums are full of subject matter experts, or SMEs if you're in the online course business, and offer a unique learning opportunity. That's why our learning programs at museums are a mainstay for schools and why our konga remember these visits so vividly. Museums tell stories differently to traditional learning institutions. The emphasis museums place on communities and the Taonga that we hold and the people and stories connected to them humanises our learning offer. It enables the learner to emotionally connect and to see themselves in these stories, evoking a deeper response and deeper reflection than they might have otherwise. The purpose we feel that museums and other cultural and heritage institutions can offer to MOOCs are the opportunity for lifelong learning. If you're looking at career change or development, how can you learn about that new area? And also about local histories and stories, which is so prevalent to our teachers in New Zealand at the moment, as they're learning more about teaching Aotearoa New Zealand histories. Accessibility is another key aspect for online learning for cultural and heritage institutions. How do we fill the gaps of knowledge that might have been? How and where can we go to learn what may not have been learnt at school? Social media, Wikipedia, there's a range of online resources, or even our peers who might have the same gaps and biases that we have as well. Many resources can lack the credibility, the nuance, the context, and important perspectives that we need to help complete our knowledge in particular learning areas. We also live in an age of increasing disinformation and mistrust. Museums are one of the last institutional information providers that have a high level of public trust. Through their research, the American Alliance of Museums noticed how the public regarded museums as highly trustworthy sources of information. If we are perceived as one of the last remaining public sources of information, do we have an obligation to expand our educational offerings to adult learners and into the digital space in ways in which we haven't done before? We know there are significant gaps in the public knowledge of Aotearoa New Zealand history, Māori and Pacific culture and Matauranga, biculturalism and what it means for us, and the uniqueness and the vulnerability of our biodiversity. Te Papa's already done a lot of mahi in these areas, and our website is a great resource. We realised we could build and extend on this to create intentional, scaffolded and facilitated experiences to guide interested manahuri or interested learners through some of these big topics. We could connect them to a supportive community of learners who challenge and motivate them along their journey, and to leverage our collections to tell our history through their Taonga and the people that have experienced it. Through our online pilot courses, we have evidenced the value of social commentary, where learners build a community through the course, and it adds another dimension to our shared knowledge online. And for us, from the outset for our courses, particularly with the Te Tiaki Tonga ones, and going forward, we wanted a platform that offered that social commentary. We know good learning happens when you interact with others and make sense of that information. And we didn't just want to put the information up online in a course format and not have our learners engage with us. So our course facilitators are actively in there, if not 3 or 4 times a week, but on the whole, a couple of times a day, responding to comments, seeing what's being said. But what we're also noticing, and Mel will talk about this later, is how our learners engage with each other as well. As part of the Manatū contract for Te Tiaki Tonga, we secured a free 3-year contract with FutureLearn, a UK platform that was coming into, at that time, was coming into the Asia Pacific regions. They're an important platform for us for a couple of reasons. The first was that they were one of the very few big online course providers that focus on social learning. So the comment threads and steps where learners can talk to each other. Most of the online platforms that exist now don't have that social commentary, so it was a huge focus for us. The other was that our foray into online courses aligned with an Education New Zealand pilot platform where they were looking at online courses, New Zealand online courses being promoted to an international audience. And it gave us the opportunity to be involved in their marketing drive and push for that audience as well. So last year we created 7 courses, the 5 professional learning courses for cultural and heritage sector educators. They were well received, and we also did 2 under the Te Papa name to get a feel for the appetite of learners for entry-level short interest courses that more broadly showcase the museum and New Zealand as a whole. Our Te Tiaki Tonga courses were designed around cultural and heritage sector education practices. So they had quite a niche audience and they were designed for that audience. So the Te Papa ones were very general. All our courses are free and open to learners. So in the Education New Zealand pilot, they had 2 stages. The first stage was with the FutureLearn platform, where we consistently performed well above the provider average. The other providers, there were about 25 of them, and they all tended to be formal education institutions such as universities, and we were the only cultural and heritage institution. Despite our 2 Te Papa only courses making up about 2.2% of the Education New Zealand offerings, so they were 2.2% of the courses available, we brought in over 11% of the enrolments. Our courses were both in the top 6 of all 86 courses for enrolments and the top 3 for completions, showing the strong community interest that was involved for the museum as an education provider and in learning for learning's sake. As of the end of September this year, which is about 1 year of the pilot of both the FutureLearn and the Education New Zealand own platform, we've had 1,200 learners through our courses, and we've reached our target audience even on a non-New Zealand platform. So while we've had Education New Zealand support and marketing, their interest hasn't been for the New Zealand market. They've been interested in bringing international learners into the New Zealand courses and getting sign-ups and completion rates. So we've got over 4,000 combined comments on our 3 courses, and our completion rates are very high, and it's a figure that we're very proud of at 48.4%, which is much higher than the average completion rate for online course learning. And I think that attributes to the social learning commentary that we have going, but also the interest people have in the Te Papa subjects that we've been writing about. So who are our online learners? Our learners were full-time workers, with 80% of them having degrees. Our audience swung much younger than the traditional, the general market for the Education New Zealand pilot. Most of them were in full-time employment versus a retired audience, and they were slightly less highly educated than the pilot as a whole. We also saw a much greater proportion of New Zealand enrolments than in other courses. And our FutureLearn course that we on protest that we released this year has managed to target a 30% New Zealand audience, which, given we haven't really marketed to them, is quite incredible. And Mel will talk more about that shortly. And our top countries for access were the UK, New Zealand, the USA and Australia. After Education New Zealand finished part 1 of its pilot, they launched the second part, which was they developed their own online course platform to test the waters to see how that might float. It was a short-term 3-month turnaround, and I have to give credit to Education New Zealand. They built their whole platform within a very short amount of time. I think they had 4 months between start and the development of it, and they ran that pilot for about 3 months. The platform's still up online, but they're not accepting any new courses. And again, just like the FutureLearn, most of the providers that provided courses to that platform were strong education providers, and we were the only cultural and heritage institution. We have been very fortunate to be part of the Education New Zealand platform, to have opportunities to trial across a range of different platforms, and with Education New Zealand funding and advertising and support that we wouldn't have had otherwise, and we wanted to make the most of it, and we did. I'm going to hand over to Mel now, who's going to take you a deep dive into the course, and this is the exciting part. You get to learn about what we've written about and how our learners have received the information.
Kia ora, thank you, Tara. So what do our courses look like? Our first 2 courses are designed to be sister courses and offer an accessible introduction to 2 of Aotearoa's most important topics, our incredible natural heritage and the bicultural history that has shaped us. So these 2 courses are really short, only 3 or 4 hours total over the course of a couple of weeks, with each week introducing new topics told through text, video and images, and open discussions and prompts for learners to reflect and discuss any connections they can see. Our natural history course looks at the deep history of Aotearoa, including both Western science and Mataranga Māori perspectives. Then we look at how our geography led to the evolution of biodiversity here like nowhere else on Earth, and then head into the ways we're now fighting to protect these Taonga species. So what you see on the screen is part of the landing page for our course and a selection of the steps within it, including as many images, items and stories from the collections as we could manage. The sister to the natural history course looks more closely at the human history of Aotearoa. It starts with the incredible Pacific navigators and the challenges they would have faced in a new land, and then the second week looks at first meetings between European explorers and tangata whenua, colonisation and te tiriti o Waitangi. In the final week, we look at the museum as an example of how these events have shaped the nation, looking at its exhibitions, its partnerships, and the building itself as a bicultural entity. And these 2 courses seem to be a hit with our audience, both local and international. Enrolments were high, and the feedback was that they were both engaging and educational. Our most recent course, building on the success of the first 2, is quite a different beast. Our protest course tackles the social history of Aotearoa over the last 150 years through the lens of protest. It's longer, deeper, and covers a lot more ground. It's an enormously diverse course, drawing heavily not just from our own collections, but cultural heritage banks from around the motu. We work closely with our subject matter experts, and as much as possible, centred the voices of the groups involved, highlighting personal stories, objects, and experiences within larger movements. So this was an experiment for us to see whether our fledgling audience had the appetite for something more substantial. And without the promotion coming from the ENZ pilot, which had ended by this point, and much denser material, we saw slightly lower enrolments, but incredible engagement with the material and brilliant reviews from our learners. We're really proud of this offering and are now itching to get it out to as many people as we can and to put all the learning we've gathered from these 3 courses into new channels and new audiences. So what have we learned? In this section of the presentation, I'm going to outline what we think are our 6 key takeaways from this pilot. And I've included some of the feedback we've received. We've tried to limit how many to include, but there are hundreds and they've been overwhelmingly positive. I'm not going to read them out, but we will make this presentation and more feedback available for you to look back on if you're interested. So the first takeaway was that our courses meet a need. As a learning team, we've put a lot of resources in the last few years into supporting the teaching of Aotearoa New Zealand history to our tamariki, including supporting teachers to hone their knowledge and confidence in teaching the new curriculum. But we knew the need was broader than that. Many, perhaps even most adults in New Zealand don't really know the ins and outs of our history. And as the national discussions increasingly touch on these deep-seated issues, it's hard for them to know where to begin. Our learners confirmed for us that many Kiwis, both those born here and migrants to this whenua, have a desire to fill those knowledge gaps. Our second takeaway was that online courses are an effective way to support those learners. For the huge numbers of Kiwis who learn little, if any, New Zealand history at school since the 1950s up to today, our courses provided an accessible on-ramp to gain confidence in this area and begin to understand the nuance of issues facing Aotearoa today. And a common response was surprise that the content, be it natural history, Māori culture, the colonial period, treaty grievances, or historical and modern protest movements, was either brand new to them or very different to what they'd previously learned. Many expressed that on reflection, the history that they had been taught was, in their words, sanitised or one-sided. Some had suspected this, but were still surprised at just how much they hadn't known. And as mentioned earlier, living in the information age can actually make it harder to access information that can be trusted or to balance conflicting perspectives. So a short course can offer a much more structured, scaffolded and supportive way to start a journey into what can often be a contentious space. Our third takeaway is that museums bring something unique and valuable to the online course space. As Tara mentioned, museum education often leans into the human stories behind the history. Objects, art, community impacts, creative movements and stories. This really helps learners to connect with the material. History, for example, is often taught just through facts and figures, but our courses have a different emphasis, telling a variety of perspectives from across our community. For example, when we're talking about the impact and experience of immigrants to this whenua, we outline the facts, but then we can introduce exhibition interviews conducted with modern immigrants. We can share an art curator's kōrero on the way a Lithuanian refugee artist's style actually influenced a generation of Kiwi painters. We can share the story of the lighter made in secret in a World War II concentration camp that came to Aotearoa with a Polish immigrant and wound up in the National Museum. We know storytelling is a powerful way to deepen the learning. Telling history through a tapestry of human experience helps people to see the world through the eyes of groups they may not be a part of. And this is a place where museums can really excel. This approach also proved highly engaging to our audience and prompted them to share a lot of their own stories and reflections and to seek connections with each other throughout the course. Which leads us to our fourth takeaway. Active facilitation and discussion is important. It's a fairly unusual feature on many online course platforms, but we knew we wanted some level of engagement and discussion within the course. So we included prompts for reflection and discussion on each and every page. So we weren't sure what to expect, but our project course got thousands of comments in just a couple of months. Our learners were asking and answering each other's questions, sharing resources, making comparisons with other history or events they were familiar with, and reflecting on how their perspectives were changing. They were extending their learning beyond the course and bringing what they learned back to their peers. Their discussions ended up covering a much broader range of topics than we'd included. Some of them even made arrangements to join up and go through our other courses together as a cohort. And we were obviously delighted by this and made sure our facilitator was active in there every day, supporting, guiding and motivating the learners. And they were super vocal about how much this enhanced their learning experience. So this informed our approach, and we now consider this a fundamental part of our offering. It also keeps them engaged and motivated. Even for the less chatty learners, the feeling of being part of a community kept them coming back for the weeks of the course. This is especially important because it really headed off the sometimes high attrition rate you see in the online course space sometimes. Our fifth insight is that our courses support tamariki by supporting teachers. When we were putting these together, we had a really broad audience in mind, curious lifelong learners. But from the feedback, we saw that educators at mainstream schools, second chance learning facilities and other cultural heritage institutions were joining in and chiming in. So we've been working in the PLD space to support teachers in rolling out the new histories curriculum, and except for those that specifically seek tertiary learning in our history, Many of them don't feel that confident in teaching it. But the educators who found our courses told us it was an effective way to increase their understanding and confidence, and that they were using the content we'd put together as a resource to craft their own materials and lesson plans. This was a really pleasant surprise, so we will create future courses, maybe even specialty courses, with educators of all kinds in mind. Finally, we learned that our courses drew people into Te Papa's other offerings. We weren't surprised that learners wanted to come see the museum in person after going through our courses, but what we hadn't expected was how many learners we inadvertently switched onto the Te Papa website as a go-to trusted resource. Unlike some of the more academic providers, all of Te Papa's online resources are free, open, and designed to be accessible for any level of learner. And our experts have been creating this for decades, so in many cases the content we needed for an online course already existed. It was just a matter of packaging it up into a larger story. And by linking back to our website content, we showed our learners that if they had questions or wanted to dive deeper, hey, your national museum is actually a really great place to start. And the credit for this goes to our experts and to our digital team, who have been doing a brilliant job of making the website user-friendly and creating dedicated topic hubs that make it a really easy self-directed learning space to step into. So going forward, that's another connection point that we will add into our offerings. In short, we're really encouraged by our pilot so far. We're confident that we have an audience for this content. We understand what that audience values. It's worthwhile and is making an impact. Museums are the right institution to produce this kind of content. There's greater potential still to explore. And we want this, like all of our content, to be as free and accessible as possible to everyone. So we'll close out with Tara as we're exploring what's next for us. Kia ora.
So just to close, what's next for us in terms of online courses at Te Papa? We're still exploring this as an option. We're looking at different platforms and the best way for us to operate, particularly to attract a New Zealand audience. New Zealand, Australia and Pacific are our key audiences. So how can we market to that? We're also looking at scaling up in terms of our advertising and marketing, but also in the way in which we produce our courses. We're also looking at how we can work more closely with our audiences. So the courses we've done to date are courses that we've decided we think people might like, but we actually want to switch that around and talk to our audience now to see what courses they would like from us. And we'd like to collaborate more across museums so that when we're telling a story or talking about a course, we're using a range of taonga from a range of museums around the country so that it's not just Te Papa's content, but it's a range of ones, because we've got the capacity in-house to write these courses. How can we work with others to do that? And then finally, just to finish with, we are looking at partnering with a new partner next year, something that we're very excited about that will give us much greater reach than we've currently got. So stay tuned, watch the space, and hopefully we'll have an announcement coming through in January. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora.
So we probably do have time for just one very quick question, because I know this will be a quick answer, hopefully.
Yeah.
How did you market and choose the pricing for the courses?
So the courses are all freely available online. Our partner FutureLearn does put a course fee on them if you don't complete them within the time frame. So if it's a 4-week course, you get it 4 weeks free and then after that. But we don't want cost to be a barrier. So that's why we're looking for platforms where there is no cost attached whatsoever.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So time to move if you're moving, time to stay if you're staying. Thank you.